Before we begin, we've got a little bit of housekeeping to take care of. We are, of course, recording this webinar, and you will receive a copy of it by email after we're done. Also, we have both a Q&A and a chat line set up. So as we proceed, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in there. We'll try and answer them on the fly, but if we don't get to them in the middle of the conversation, we'll try and address them at the end. And if we do happen to run out of time and there are too many questions, we will see if we can address them later on. My name is Rick Duchalski, and I am Communications Specialist with CarriersEdge. And today, I am in conversation with Mark Murrell, President, CarriersEdge. How are you, Mark?
I'm doing well. Hello, Rick.
Hello, hello. So today, we are talking about selecting and implementing online training. I think I want to travel down two different paths. One is if I'm a fleet owner, deciding what my needs are. If I'm thinking about maybe I do need an online training program, what my needs are, how to figure out what it is I need, what it is I don't need, and then separate from that, although connected, to look at all the different possible programs out there and figure out, separate the wheat from the chaff. What's good and what isn't so good. Does it work for you?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, so I'm a small fleet. Maybe I've got 15 trucks, and I've been doing in-person training. I'm thinking about moving towards online. What do I need to know about myself? How do I evaluate where my needs are?
Well, if you're a small fleet and you've been doing training in classroom and in person, I would say yes, you absolutely do need to look at doing something online. For the simple fact that you really can't effectively train staff by dragging them off the road into a classroom. If drivers are sitting in class, that means that they're not on the road making money and they're not at home having a life. So there are trade-offs that are not going to be great there. So we don't ever want to get rid of that in-person contact. We do want to continue to have people getting together for social reasons and to build the community and for the benefit of discussions and all of those kind of things, but you can't cover all the things that need to be covered. The pace of change in the industry, the amount of things that drivers need to be up to speed on, the amount of things they need to be reminded about, you can't reasonably do that in a classroom format. So online really is about the only way that a fleet is going to be able to get that out there. So simple answer, if you're a fleet, you need to be doing that. That's an easy one.
Yeah, fair enough. But you mentioned though the drivers need to be kept up to speed on all these different things. But you're going to have a lot of stakeholders. Of course, the drivers are going to want to have a say in that.
Mm-hmm.
But
100%.
the executives are going to want to have a say. I'm sure
Yes.
Your insurance people would love to weigh in on that. Maybe even your legal representation. All sorts of folks. So, who do you prioritize?
That's a good question. For a small fleet, they may not have legal counsel that they're using on a regular basis, but they definitely are going to have an insurance risk consultant who comes in and checks out what's happening in the fleet periodically. And they should definitely be involved. I don't know that they need to be involved in the evaluation in terms of checking out exactly what you're doing, but they can certainly point you in the right direction. They can give you some ideas. They can tell you what their experiences are. The benefit of those people is that they are out talking to fleets all the time. So they're going to have experiences of what's working for other fleets, what's not working, and they can talk about, what they're seeing in the field, but also what they would like to see. They're going to have a wish list of what they would like to see when they come in to do an audit, and that can start to inform some of the decisions about what the online training system needs to look like. What does it need to do? So start to define the requirements that it needs to be able to have a certain type of reporting or track data in a particular way. That can be very useful. Definitely internal stakeholders need to be at the table. Drivers certainly need to be involved. Management needs to be involved. All of those people need to be part of the process of testing it out, of thinking about how it's going to be rolled out, how to make effective use of it within the organization. All of those people have a role to play in that.
Plus, you've got some change management issues as well, right? So they're all
100%.
both invested in it, and also, change is hard.
Well, I think that's a good part to talk about a little bit, because you often get people that will sort of come in and say, okay, we're going to do this, and not really think about getting buy-in for the different groups. So we want all those people to buy into it, and we need to get them to buy into it by positioning it in a way that it is going to be a benefit for them. So if you go to drivers and say, well, we're doing this because you're such a bunch of screw ups that we've got to start doing training, well, nobody's going to be excited about that. But if it's positioned more as, okay, we know we need to do training on a regular basis, we want to make it as non-disruptive as possible. We don't want it to be invasive and to be, encroaching on your personal time any more than it absolutely has to. So we're going to do it online. You can do it at your convenience. That usually gets people thinking, okay, well, this is not so terrible. I should look into what this is doing. And maybe there's some things I'd like to learn more about. Okay, then they're sort of going down the right path. You get them in that frame of mind, they're going to be more of a contributor to the process rather than a roadblock.
Right. And that's will affect your overall transition period. I imagine that maybe I don't have a really good sense of what that transition period is supposed to look like, but kind of front loading that change with your stakeholders, I suppose, will shorten that time.
Yeah, you make a good point that if it's done right, you can get some good excitement among the people that are interested in doing it. And that can actually speed up that rollout, because they can sort of take it and run with it. And we have seen cases where people are implementing this and drivers are really on board with it, and they will kind of pull it out rather than the fleet pushing it out. It will be the drivers saying, yeah, give us more. And we want more of this, and we want to learn, and it's working well for us. They like not having to lose a weekend to come in for a driver meeting or lose driving time to sit in class. So they can really be the ones that help get it out there and speed that process for sure.
Because there is this perception that drivers, they don't want to do this, they don't want to do that, but actually, from what you're saying, you can weaponize their role. And
yeah. I've never seen drivers who don't want more training. I've never spoken to a driver who says, no, I know it all. I don't need any more training. What I have seen is drivers who don't want their time wasted, who don't want to be stuck in front of things that aren't relevant for them or aren't valuable or aren't well crafted, which is sort of the basics of where we're going with this session, is how to look for something that is going to get them on side. But I've never come across drivers who don't want more training. They absolutely want to learn more. They're doing this as their profession. They want to be better at it. They want to know what's going on. Nobody likes to be in a fog with their job. They want to know what's happening. So if you can give them that in a way that is not patronizing to them and isn't positioned as a chore, they're going to be on side with it.
Okay, so you said we're supposed to be getting into what to look for in potential product. So let's kick some tires. I mean, one of the biggest things is going to be content, right? I need to know the content that I'm going to be giving to my drivers. And there's a feeling that okay, there's just some info and I've got to roll it out to drivers, and they will just consume it in some way. But that's not how people learn. It's not a lot of people learn, and people actually learn in different ways. So what do I need to know about learning styles and content?
Well, there's several things there. First is to recognize the differences in classroom versus online. And these are things that most instructors add in without even really thinking about it much, and that is the personal context. So if you have a course on vehicle inspection or winter driving or whatever it might be, if you're delivering that in class and you're the person talking about that content, you will, without even really thinking about it, add your own experience into that. You're going to have the context of how you do it, what your life experience has been, how it works within the specific company, and all of that becomes very useful for the drivers. So it isn't just step one, do this, step two, do that. There's always that personal element added onto it. So when you're delivering content online, you don't have that personal element of that speaker who's providing their own context, their own story. So you need that to be built in to the education content within the e-learning. So the online training stuff needs to include that context so that drivers can see, okay, I get how this relates to me. Because if it's regulatory stuff, if it's basic content, it can be really dry and it can be really intentionally sort of dehumanized. Like, here are the steps that must be completed. And it's always written in very passive language like that in legal documents or in the regulations. So that's not something that's going to be easy for anybody to learn from. You have to have content that takes that, turns it into something that is real and is human and is part of a day. So when you start your day, you go out to the truck and you do this. Then step 2, you go to this other place and do this. Add in that context so that people can see how it relates to them and how it fits into their day. And without that, they're going to just be spending all their time looking at the content and thinking, how do I apply this? So you want to make sure that the content includes that it isn't just sort of dumping out straight information. Also, on the learning styles, yes, you make a really good point that people learn in different ways. So some people learn by reading, some people learn by listening, some people need to do things, some people need to see visuals. So what's interesting, I find, about the trucking industry is I've seen a very even split in all those different learning styles, more so than in other industries. So there are some industries where you have really heavy concentration of particular types of learning styles. And I know we're going to talk about this in a future webinar where we dig into learning styles, but for instance, in entertainment, you have a lot of visual learners. You have a lot of, in the arts, you obviously have a lot of visual learners in there. Legal, you have a lot of people who learn by reading, which is good because they have to read tons of stuff. And if you can't learn by reading, you're going to be at a disadvantage. Trucking has got a very even mix of people who learn by reading, by listening, by looking, by doing, all of these things. So effective education material needs to incorporate all of those elements. It needs to have something for people to read. It needs to have something for them to listen to. They need to have a chance to see things and to actually do it. And that is a bit tricky, but it can, it's certainly tricky to produce, but it can make for a much better experience. It gives people options when they're consuming that content, but it also addresses those different learning styles a bit better. So it's funny that people have sort of drifted to YouTube as the place to learn things. And, in the consumer or in the personal space, we all go to YouTube to see if there's a tutorial on something. But more and more, it isn't just the person talking to the screen about what they're doing. There's captions underneath it. So you've got text, you've got the audio, you've got the person demonstrating it. You end up having more of that. And that's an important part of having that education out there, is making sure that all of those pieces are covered so that people can learn how they want to learn, and they're going to have an equally effective experience no matter how they learn. You don't want somebody feeling at a disadvantage because the content doesn't address their learning styles and they're struggling. And when people are struggling with it, that's when they're going to start telling you that they don't need it or they don't want training. You get all of these other things coming up. You're never going to have a driver say, I don't understand it, so I don't like it. They're always going to say, we don't need that stuff. They're always going to position it as somebody else's problem. So to avoid that, make sure the content has got material in there that addresses all the different learning styles.
There's something interesting in there that you said. There's a phenomenon in education that behavior is communication. That if a student is uncomfortable and they're pushing back on something, it's because they're trying to communicate something. And so when you say that the driver is saying no, I don't want that, it's not because he doesn't want it. It's because there's something that isn't working for him.
That's a really good point. That is an excellent thing that I think we could almost do a whole webinar just on that, what drivers really mean when they say different things, because it always does mean something else. You have to look under the surface of these things. If they say they don't want training, what is it that they're really saying? If they say they don't like some content, what is it that they're really saying? What is really behind that? And it's usually more about how it's being presented, what the messaging is, how it's worked into their day. Are they being compensated for their time, or are they expected to do it for free? It's things like that.
Right.
So
Maybe they really
definitely
value
something
the
to think about.
content.
Yeah.
They're just annoyed they're not getting paid for, not being on the road and
Or somebody is
training.
pressuring them to make up the time somewhere else. Right. So there's lots of other things that need to be considered in there. So definitely think about that when you're sort of making those plans and figuring out uh, how to move into an online training world. Think about how to incorporate all of that in a way that isn't going to add more pressure onto the drivers.
And in terms of reaching as many drivers in as many different ways as you can, if I have drivers who speak another language, clearly Google Translate is the best way to go, right?
Yeah, ask any non-English speaker what they think of Google Translate, and then sit down and be ready for a diatribe that will go for a while. Google Translate is great as a quick and dirty way of getting a sense of what somebody has said in a different language, but it's not translation. I mean, any translator will tell you that's an insult. It's certainly an insult to translators, but it's an insult to speakers of those languages because it's always just a little bit off. It never really covers it. But you're talking about a couple of different things there. So translation absolutely needs to be factored in. If you have got people that speak other languages, and if they don't, if it's official languages, like in Canada, we need to provide French. So if you're looking at content, does it have French? If you are in the US, do you have a significant population of Spanish speakers? And if so, is the content available in Spanish, or how much content is available in Spanish? That is certainly something to consider. But for people that are not speaking or are just learning English, they're not speaking one of those sort of official languages, it's important to give them material in a way that helps them with that ESL. So for English as a second language participants, the content really benefits from having all of those elements that we were talking about before, like seeing the words, hearing them spoken, having visuals that complement it. That makes it a lot easier for people to follow, and it helps them to learn the language a little bit because they get more of an association that this is what the word looks like, here's how it sounds, and here's the visual that goes with it. So it helps them in that regard. But along with that, this gets into the weeds a little bit. One of the benefits of online training, in theory, is that it allows people to go at their own pace. That if you feel that you're comfortable going quicker, you can go quicker. If you want to go slower, you can do that as well. So that is the theoretical benefit, that people can take the time they need to take without feeling like they're bogging down the classroom, without feeling self-conscious about slowing down the pace in a classroom. But there are e-learning products out there, and sometimes it's just configuration where it really kind of enforces a specific amount of time, that you have to go at a particular pace, you can't skip certain things, you must go at a certain way, you can't go back and go over it. And that's something to watch for as well. Watch for the opportunity to be flexible in the delivery. People should be able to get through it as fast or as slow as they need. Sometimes people want to skip through things because they're comfortable with it and spend time elsewhere. And that's where you want to give them that flexibility. Now, we do need to track the time that they're spending, and any decent online program should do that. And there absolutely should be really rigorous testing at the end to validate that they know what they're supposed to know. So education really should be outcomes based, really should be based on measuring whether people have met the learning objectives, rather than did they spend 40 minutes when I thought they were going to spend 40 minutes. Who's to say that they need exactly 40 minutes to learn this content? Maybe somebody else, if someone needs 48, maybe another person needs 30. I mean, there are a few specific cases where content does need to be a certain length, most notably the US drug and alcohol reasonable suspicion training, which ridiculously just says 1 hour of drugs and 1 hour on alcohol. But that's kind of a failure of oversight. But in most cases, there aren't specific times that need to be covered. We just need to keep track of how long people are spending and make sure that they are able to pass the test at the end. make sure that they have a really good sense of the material, and that we are able to validate that at the end.
I think you are in a way answering the next question I have. Before I ask it, though, I just want to touch back on foreign language, and particularly French. If you've got a program in French in Canada, make sure that it is French Canadian. That the kind of French we speak in Canada is not like the French that is spoken in other places.
Same thing with Spanish. Spanish in the U.S. is not Spanish in Spain. Right.
So make sure it's appropriate for your audience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%.
I'm wondering about knowing the difference. If I am looking to purchase a program, just knowing the difference between something flashy and something substantive.
Yeah.
And you've touched on a few things with different learning styles and trackable reports and things like that. I mean, is that the essence of it?
So flashy, and there's like certainly things that can be really slick. And when you first look at it, it's like, oh my God, this thing looks so cool. Wow, this is amazing. Like really a lot of fancy, kind of over the top bells and whistles stuff that you go like, wow, this is really, it looks like a movie or something, a big budget movie, not like an indie film. And that can be great. But what you have to think about is, how am I going to feel about this after 2 hours of it? And it may not be that the content is 2 hours long, but some of these things are great for the first 2 minutes. And then it's like, yeah, okay, let's get on with it now. It's kind of like somebody who, the radio voice. Most of us here are old enough that we listen to radio regularly. And there's people that have that radio voice. And that high energy radio voice is fantastic for the 2 minutes that person is speaking between songs. But if you try and listen to somebody talking like that for an hour, it's exhausting. You don't get much out of it. It draws too much energy out of you. So similarly with content, sometimes there's so much flash and sizzle that it can be too much. Like a little bit of the beginning is great, sort of a splashy opening, but then let's get into the content. Like this is work after all. These people are professionals. They don't need a video game. They don't need a movie trailer. They need content that is going to help them do their jobs better. So we want to make sure that we've got content that is accurate and current, and that it covers all of the different learning styles, and that it shows that in a way that is going to be meaningful for the audience and isn't continuously wrapped in gimmicks, basically. So there's nothing wrong with having a little bit of fun with it, having some interaction. Definitely want to have interaction, exercises, and animations, and all of that stuff, and that can add a lot to it. But if it's all about the flashy stuff at the beginning, or that just continues too far through, it ends up being distracting. You get to the point where it's like, okay, let's just get on with it now. Like, we want to learn this stuff. Let's just get to it.
Speaking of flash, one of your favorite topics, the sales guy.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you need them. Is that right? I mean,
well, that's sort of getting into the buying process a little bit, and how to establish a relationship with a vendor, which is an important part of it as well. Because it isn't just the product that you're signing up for, it is a vendor that you're establishing a relationship with. So it's important to think about how that vendor acts, how they interact with you, what their priorities are, and what that is going to mean in terms of your longer term relationship with them. This is not like going to a hardware store and making a purchase, and if you don't like it, you don't go back to that hardware store unit, right? This is a service, an online training system, any back office system is a relationship that you're entering into with a provider. So you want to make sure that it's somebody who sort of fits your philosophies about how the business should be run, who is committed to it as much as you are, is going to be around for the longer term, like those kind of things. Somebody who takes it seriously, somebody who is doing it as a focus area. I mean, you don't want to get into a flashy product that looks great on the surface, and maybe then you discover that the vendor doesn't really care, or they're not really in it for the long haul. 3 months in, they decide they don't want to do that anymore. Like, that's going to be a problem. So think about the vendor, think about how they're doing things, what their service looks like, how long they've been in business, and get to know them a little bit. And the sales part of that process certainly is important as well, but understand that every time they're giving you free stuff, you're paying for it in a different way. It's coming out of those license fees. So, I have written some articles in the past about understanding where those license fees go and how much of it goes into the sales process versus putting it into product development and support and all of those other things. So, sales is certainly important, because the sales representative is going to help take you through that buying process. They'll essentially be like the project manager of the evaluation and buying process, but also talk to the support people, talk to other customers about the support, see what it's like, how easy is it to get a hold of somebody when you have a problem. Like, that side of it ends up being much more important in the long term, because once the sale is done, you won't be talking to that salesperson all that often. It will be more of the ongoing support, and they'll have different names. It could be client onboarding, customer experience, customer success, whatever the name is. But those people are going to be very important in helping you have success down the road.
That was, in another context, I think I heard you say something that kind of it confused me a bit. I think the phrase you used was your relationship with the vendor is going to be more important than the specific features of the product. And I'm like, really?
Yeah.
But that's pretty much what you're talking about.
Well, it can seem a bit counterintuitive, but I think you have to look at the product in terms of what it is today and where it's going in the future. So if the product is great today, but the vendor doesn't really care about it and they're not actively building it or something like that, then that's where it's going to be potentially an issue down the road. And it might be that the product today is everything you need now and everything you're going to need for the next 5 years or 10 years, then that's fine. That's rare. It doesn't happen that often. In most cases, your needs are going to change. Your business is growing. Your business operation is evolving over time. And so you want a vendor who is going to be doing that similar kind of evolution with you, who's going to be along for the ride over the longer term. So the features that exist today, maybe they're not exactly what you want, maybe they're most of what you want. But if that vendor's focus is listening to customers, getting feedback, continuing to advance those features, and to build things that are going to prepare the users for the future, then you're in really good shape, right? Because maybe they don't have everything today, but you know that they're working on it, that they're going to be taking your feedback, and it actually can be a good opportunity for you to shape a little bit of that product growth. So good vendors will listen to their customers and incorporate that feedback into their product planning and the design of specific features as well. So it could be that you end up shaping some of those features because you're the one saying, hey, we want it to do this. So, I mean, we've certainly done that. We've got a lot of features that we've built because customers have asked for them and they've said, we would like it to do this or that. And so we're like, yeah, that's a good idea. Let's do it. And there have been places on the other side where we've gone to some of our suppliers and said, it would be really helpful if it would do this. And the better vendors absolutely will listen to that and incorporate it.
So that's a difference between simple scalability, right? If my company goes from 15 trucks to 45 trucks, in principle, any given program I'm using should be able to do that. But you're talking about sort of a responsive evolution.
Well, in that situation, your company goes from 15 trucks to 45. You're going to find that your job managing that business changes an awful lot. And what you need out of any particular product is going to change as well. On the small end, you maybe just needed something that was going to get content out there and give you some basic tracking to make sure that people were completing it on time and that they're passing their tests, and you can see where they need extra help. Very basic. But as you get to the the larger size, 30 trucks, 45 trucks, now you've got some other managers that are involved. They need to be in the loop with some customized reporting. You need some more metrics on what's happening and why it's happening, and you need to integrate with other systems. Your needs start to change in terms of what you're after from that system, and it needs to evolve with you.
This sounds like it's going to change my job description now. So as all this new data comes in, right now, I'm getting all these reports, all this trackability about my drivers, administrating this stuff, and it sounds like I'm just going to be doing something different, which seems kind of daunting.
Well, certainly any good online training system is going to have a lot of options for automating that work. And that is where, maybe your job changes, but your use of the system changes as well. So in the beginning, yeah, you're doing some of that configuration yourself. But down the road, as the company grows, you're not interested in doing that, or you don't have time for it, or now you've got too many drivers that you can't reasonably be doing that manually all the time. So you're going to lean on the automation. And any good system should allow you to automate assignments, automate report generation, have some of these things that are happening automatically based on other activities, like that kind of stuff. And I would definitely be looking at that administrative side as well. So what does it mean today, and what could I potentially be doing down the road when my job changes? What are the things that I may not use today, but it's good to know about them because down the road they will become useful.
Right. Okay. Kind of an important question. Can we talk cost? or maybe more specifically ROI, right? Maybe that's the more relevant one.
Yeah. Well, definitely these things need to be considered. And this is also a discussion to have when talking to vendors about this sort of thing is, what does it cost, but what are all the costs? So there's going to be a subscription cost. In almost every case, online training is a service. So there's that monthly fee or annual fee for access. But are there other costs? Is there a setup cost? Is there a startup fee? Is there an extra charge for different pieces? Like, what do you actually get for that cost? Sometimes there's a subscription fee, but it's only part of the functionality, and there's add-on costs for other bits of it. All of those things need to be factored in and need to be understood as well. Sometimes there's heavy usage, sort of overage charges. Sometimes if you're adding your own content, they'll charge for storage. So there's a lot of those things to look at, and support as well. What kind of support is included in that basic package that you're looking at? So is it a situation where you really only get email support for one person, but if you want phone support or you want extended hours support, that's an extra charge on top? So these are things to look at. Everybody does it differently. We are a bit atypical in that we only have the one fee, and it's, everything is sort of bundled into that, and full support is included in it as well. Most of the time, those things are extras, and it's almost like buying a plane ticket. There's a million different options in the way people do it. So figure that out, get a sense of what the costs are going to be. The number that I normally give people for budgeting is assume $6 per user per month, or $70 roughly per user per year. Almost never costs that much, but that's a great budget number, because if your ROI calculation works at that, you're going to be set, because you're not going to end up paying that much. It's always going to be, like, I think most of our customers are sort of in the $4 or $5 range per user per month. But if the numbers work at that level, like, you're going to be set. So making the numbers work, we've got entire webinars that talk about how to drill down into that. But generally, even moving one or two driver meetings online, taking those out of that in-person situation, moving them online, that usually covers the cost of the online for the whole year. Or like being able to cut a day out of orientation or something. Those are the typical things where people see the ROI really grow there. And that's not even looking at all of the new things that they can be doing. So like giving more training out to drivers and simplifying the process of doing audits and all of these kind of things, or running analytics to see where there's trends happening. Like all of those things are sort of on top of it, but usually just some of the status quo stuff moved online will cover the cost, and you'll have your ROI right there before you even get into the extra pieces. I mean, that's not even talking about the improvements to safety, improvements to, cargo. You have reduced cargo damage, you have better inspections, which means better maintenance costs, and like all of those other things. But even without all of those things, the ROI is generally there.
Right. I'm thinking about this thing that you said. And I'm thinking about all the data comes in and the safety improvements, but the online training program just doesn't magically create those safety improvements for you. It's say as a safety manager, it's something I have to do with the program, with the information I'm getting. And I hinted this at this before. If I'm not used to knowing what to do with all that new information comes in, I can now see how, what my drivers are trained on, what they're testing well on, what they're not testing well on. I've got all this at my fingertips. What do I do then to sort of?
Well, the first thing that I would say is I would actually go back to your first point about just having the training done doesn't improve the safety. And to a certain extent, it actually does. Part of the reason that people have issues on the road is the lack of knowledge. Now, not every issue is a lack of knowledge that can be solved with training. But there are a lot of cases, and it maybe isn't, maybe it's not crashes, head-on crashes or something like that. But things that come out that are roadside violations are often logbook issues, they are inspection failures, there's problems with cargo securement, there's issues with the paperwork, the dangerous goods paperwork, like all of those things are the costs that are often really just drivers don't know any better, or they forgot, they were never really trained properly in the first place, so they never really understood it. Like you see people, I see this online. I don't know why this comes up in my LinkedIn feed. All of these pictures of like, rate the cargo securement, rate the strap work. And there's always all these debates in the comments about whether or not the strap work is sufficient. But the rules are pretty clear. People just don't know what the rules are. So they always err on the side of safety, and they slap all too many, all these different tie downs in different places. Fixing those things actually does have a real cost, a noticeable improvement on the cost. So you can see that just by getting people to be more informed, to actually understand what they're supposed to be doing, there will be some improvements. And in a lot of cases, things that are sort of the smaller, the lower end crashes, the dings, the bumps, the bangs, it's not people not paying attention or forgetting stuff. So the education helps as a reminder, reminder of following distance, reminder to get out and look before you back in, reminder of the things that you should be looking at when you do a turn, and those kind of things. And that will have a real effect on its own. However, getting to the larger question, what do you do with that? Yes, the tool of online training is really a tool. We talk about it as a system and as a service that allows you to do a lot of things, but it is a tool in service of improving safety. And you want to have some plan of doing something with it, which is you got to look at the data and figure out what it's telling you. It's not that hard to look at test results and see that, people missed a question here and there. Okay, that's normal. Or look at another test and it's like, this person doesn't have a clue what this content is, because they're getting some of the basic questions at the beginning wrong. So it's not that hard to look at that and see where the issues are, but it is important to do that because you always want to follow that up. You can't just put the training out there and say, okay, it's going to run on its own. I'm never going to look at it again. I'm going to check a report and make sure it's done, and that's it. That's not going to be sufficient. you always want to take that and then follow up with those drivers. Ideally, have a conversation with the drivers about the things that they're doing, have a conversation with them about what they learned. It's fabulous to do the training, put this training out there, and then have a group discussion or a driver meeting about what did you learn, what did you like, what were your takeaways from the course, those kind of things. That can be really beneficial, and that gets people talking about it, and it starts to burn that content in much more deeply for them.
Okay, yeah. When I think about programs, the way that many of them say it can integrate with ELDs, I'm pulling all these drivers into an online program. I personally am paranoid about cybersecurity.
You should be.
Yes. So how do I manage that and also effectively roll out this whole online system?
Well, that is something to look at as well. And I would say that that is a question that should be pretty high on the list for any evaluation of any system, and the training is no different. You absolutely have to be thinking about data security. And the sort of internet world originally was very focused on data security in the context of credit cards. And the rules for being able to accept and process credit cards are very stringent about what you can and can't do with all of the information that you're getting from those cards. But it's not just that, it's all kinds of personal information. Now that's extended into things like driver's license and date of birth and home address, and even things like email address are considered private information now. So any company offering a service in that area really needs to be taking that seriously, needs to have a really good answer about how they're securing that data, how they're ensuring that it is protected, that it isn't at risk of falling into the wrong hands. It isn't that they've got good cybersecurity policies internally, because a lot of times when we see these hacks now, it's coming through a vendor. It's not companies directly. So the vendors need to make sure they have their house in order. And the fleets need to be thinking about that as well, and thinking about what data they actually need to be storing in these different systems. So we do have some customers that include the driver's license in the driver profile in our system, and we treat that like private data, just like credit card information. It's encrypted and it's backed up, and only certain people have access to the systems that store that. And even when you get to the systems that store it, it's encrypted in storage, so nobody can do anything with it. That is really important. And you want to also be looking at, as you're integrating systems, what data is being passed back and forth. The bare minimum information should be passed back and forth between these systems. I don't need another system to give me an ELD or a dash cam system that we might integrate with. I don't need them to tell me where the truck was at the time that these incidents happened, or any personal information about the driver. I need to know what event happened and what I'm going to do about it. Like bare minimum information passed back and forth. That is something that definitely is worth looking at. How do people store that information? What do they pass back and forth with other systems? And how do we make sure that drivers' information is protected?
Okay. I got two questions about content. The first one is about my own content. I'm not, let's imagine I'm a fleet owner or a safety manager. I'm not an educator. I don't develop entire training programs myself.
Right.
Do I just abandon my own content and let the vendor do that, or is there value in having my own stuff, either instead of or in addition to what they have?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's definitely value in that. So, and that sort of gets into the subject of what you should be looking at the e-learning provider to supply. What part of it are they going to contribute, and what part of it are you going to contribute to this broader driver education program? And I would say look to the vendor to cover the standardized material. So regulatory basics, hours of service, vehicle inspection, fundamentals of distracted driving, defensive driving, those kind of things that are going to be the same for every fleet. And it's also really useful to rely on the vendor for things that you're never going to have time to get to. So things like wellness, or like the mental health course that we did, things like that. Most fleets are not building content in that area. They don't have time. What they do have, though, is things that are very specific to their organization. And that's the part that is a really nice supplement that fits together and can be really useful. So we want to make sure that it's a system that allows you to add your own material in and allows you to combine that material with the library content, so you can build a program where there's the generic content and then your company specific material on top of that. That will give you something that's going to be maximum effectiveness for your drivers and maximum value for your organization, because it will cover the fundamental stuff that everybody needs to know and add on your company specific pieces so that drivers know how you do business, so how to do an inspection for the specific equipment that you operate, or how to plan trips in the specific lanes that you run. All of those things that are you're never going to get in a generic library, but are very valuable. So you want to make sure that the system allows that kind of thing to be added in. Should also allow you to build tests around that material so that you can test that drivers understand the content just as much as they understand the generic stuff, the regulatory pieces, and make sure that you can get all the reporting out on all of that, that you can update the content fairly easily, run reports, do the tests, update the tests, and assign that stuff just as flexibly as anything else. I mean, it really should be treating your content like any other content in the system.
Right, right.
But you definitely want that. You definitely want to have both the library material and some of the company specific stuff in there too. And we see people actually going to the point of adding, like putting in all the policy documents or specific customer information pieces. Like when you're delivering to this customer, you always have to show up here and go to this guardhouse, and this is what you're supposed to say, like that kind of thing. That level of granularity can be in there, and it can be really beneficial as part of the training program.
Okay. And speaking of content, I'm going to say a word. I'm going to say a word that apparently relates to content and user engagement. I'm not 100% sure what it means. I've heard it a lot, slightly less so in the last year or so, and people seem to have different views on what it actually means. The word is gamification.
Yes. Let the record show that I groaned and rolled my eyes. So
people seem excited about it, or at least they did, and now less so.
And good on you for leaving this towards the end where I can't go on for too long about it. So gamification first started popping up in the broader e-learning community in the mid-2000s, around 2006, 2008. It started to grow. And it was this idea that we can take a video game type approach and throw some education in there, and it will be somehow more effective, or it will keep people engaged more. And in some audiences, apologizing for this noise outside my door, in some audiences, it was shown to have some benefit. And those audiences primarily were young people, kids that are playing video games. If you slap some education in there, yeah, it can work, and they will maybe pay attention a little bit more. So if you think about people working a retail job, or kids working at a gas station or something like that, you've got to provide them training. They don't care. They're hourly workers. They just want to get it done and get to their shift, and basically they don't care about anything except their paycheck. For those kind of people, the gamified approach can work and can engage them a little bit more and show some benefits. However, in a more seasoned professional type capacity where you're dealing with people that are committed to the work, committed to the position, I haven't seen any research that suggests it's more effective. And in some ways, it can kind of backfire because it sort of treats it as not being serious. It treats it like it's a game. It treats this as if it's not really a serious profession. So some drivers, may be up for it, but that's a place where there's probably some flash that's going to be fun for 5 minutes. But if you're trying to do a hazmat course, when you've got that mountain of information that you have to get through, and all of it is in that gamified format, it's going to take you forever to get through it. It's going to be like one of these video games that you need 40 hours to get through. And it's not really going to be very effective. It's not going to be better. So it is a little bit patronizing to suggest that drivers can't do content unless it's presented like a toy for them to play with. But there is definitely, it's a bit of a wow factor. It's a little bit like the Pepsi challenge that worked because it's super sweet and your first impression is, oh, I like that sweetness. But yeah, you get halfway through the can and you're like overwhelmed by the sweetness and it's too much.
It also
apologies to any Pepsi drinkers out there, but
it sounds like training a surgeon on one of those old tabletop operation games where you have to pull the thing out with the tweezers.
Yeah. So I mean, gamification really came about as an attempt to connect with millennials who were playing a lot of video games compared to their predecessor generations. And some areas it sort of works, but generally I would not say it's something that you should be looking for. I think if you have content, going back to what we said very much early on about different learning styles and incorporating exercises and animation and video to demonstrate things, that's going to give you a much more effective learning experience and not be sort of patronizing to the audience.
Right. I want to connect two things. Something that we said maybe about half an hour ago, maybe 40 minutes, and then something you just said recently. What we said before was beyond scalability, that both your business and the program should change over time. And just now you were saying you saw gamification come up sort of in the mid 2000s, which suggests to me that you've been doing this for a little while.
Yeah, long time.
So how would you say, just say in the last 10 years, how would you say, have you seen both the transportation industry and maybe the e-learning space change over that period? And did either of them change in a way that you expected, or were you surprised? This is more of a Mark question than an evaluating programs question.
Okay.
But
well, I'll start with transportation. So when we first came into the transportation space, there wasn't much in the way of online. And what was there was basically videos. And trucking took a different path evolving into online training than other industries did. Other industries sort of went to, they had classroom training, and then they're putting PCs on everybody's desk in the 90s. And then they started having these kind of PC-based self-contained programs that were education, and then from there moved into what we refer to as interactive online training. But trucking really didn't go that route. Trucking went from classroom to VHS and DVD, sort of video-based content that could be played, put it on a TV at the front of the room and sort of get the audience going through it that way. And so when it moved online, trucking sort of moved into basically videos served out online. So very different. And when we came in the industry, that's basically what was available for quote unquote online training. It was basically videos that were being served out. Now in the past 10 years, what I've seen is people are starting to look at more traditional interactive training. It is becoming more interactive, and you're seeing more people that are becoming aware of the importance of interaction and like incorporating different learning styles and things like that. So that has been a really good move. I would say it's probably not unexpected. It would be a reasonable path to take. I'm happy to see it because it's much more effective. It's a better way of doing things. In the broader e-learning industry, things have moved in a whole lot of different areas and sort of gone in a bunch of different directions. And most of the broader e-learning industry serves enterprise, which is basically white collar, people that are sitting in an office with super high speed connection and pretty new computers, and they can do a lot more elaborate stuff. So you get sort of I don't want to say game-based, but you get more of a build your own path through the learning and more exploratory learning type things that are happening. And you can justify with those larger audiences, all on high speed connections with good equipment, you can justify a much more elaborate, much more complex course that takes longer to build and requires a lot more technical stuff to run it. You can justify that because people have that and they're getting paid hourly. They're happy to spend the time sitting there going through courses. So it can be a much more immersive experience. And then you start to see things like augmented reality coming or supplementing with sort of VR type stuff, like the things that Apple is just announcing in their headsets. Like those things have definitely really taken off in areas where it can be supported. So ultimately, that will come into trucking as well once we get the network there and are able to support it, but it'll be a few years.
It'll be a few. We're 10 years out, as we say.
Yeah.
Well, I think we are coming up near our hour. Is there anything I've missed?
I think that's going to largely cover it. So yeah, I guess I would say if you're looking for these things, look for something that is going to serve different learning styles, is going to help the ESL people. Look for a vendor that you can build a relationship with that is investing in expanding the product and building the product, and get people internally testing it and sort of collect those requirements to make sure that you're fitting, what the drivers need, what management needs. Think about the future and where you may grow as a business. And yeah, I guess that's probably summarizing the whole 50 minutes into, 10 seconds.
Perfect. Amazing. Mark, I want to thank you for this. And I want to thank everybody for joining us. Again, our recording will be sent out, and you can, and we'll share it with those who weren't able to attend. And hoping that you will all join us for next month's webinar as well.